associate on the AADHum Initiative, so part of this team hosting this conference today, but I'm also a research educator in the FIRE program here at the University of Maryland. So FIRE stands for First Year Innovation and Research Experience. It's a relatively small program, only about 600 students out of the tens of thousands of students here at Maryland. And it's exclusively open to freshmen when they come in. So they come into the FIRE program during fall of their freshman year, and they stick around through fall of their sophomore year, hopefully, if they stay with the program. And I'm presenting today along with my team of undergraduate co-researchers. I'm so excited to introduce them to you. I'll start off today's session first by saying my Twitter handle, if you choose to engage online with me, is JLouWrites. It's up there on the screen. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And we would also like to kind of propose that this roundtable conversation is not kind of a spectator sport. So as we get the conversation going today, we don't actually encourage you to save all your questions until the end. If you have questions throughout the conversation, if any one of us says something that you'd like us to follow up on, feel free to raise your hand. I'll be kind of moderating, so I'll kind of see you and hopefully be able to bring you into the conversation throughout today's session. Okay, so now I've introduced myself, I'd like my co-researchers to go ahead and introduce themselves as well. And if you can't hear us at any point, please make sure you kind of flag us and we'll try to fix that for you as well.
Are the mics on?
They might. Yes. Yeah, yep.
Want to go first?
Okay, hi guys, I'm Sophia. I'm a sophomore and I'm currently pursuing a nursing degree from this wonderful university. So through FIRE and the AADHum Initiative, me and my partner Kayla have been basically researching the impact of Black Panther and what it means for the Black community as a whole. So our research kind of revolves around the idea that there's a lack of Black representation in film and media, and also this lack of accurate representation that oftentimes perpetuates stereotypes. So we've been focusing on the impact that this movie has made in terms of this accurate representation that we've kind of been hoping for. So, yeah.
My name is Kayla Graham. I'm also Sophia's partner in this project. I'm a sophomore majoring in communications with a track in public relations. For our project, we focused on what, like Sophia said, the Black Panther movie, but specifically for our project, we are focusing on Black voices and especially on digital spaces, like for example, like Twitter and like how everyone has been responding to the movie and how big of an impact it has made for us.
Hi everyone, I'm Alice and I'm a sophomore pursuing a degree in Information Systems and Finance with a minor in Tech Entrepreneurship. So essentially the work that I've been doing is focusing on how Black musical artists have been using digital spaces to fight for freedom, so essentially hip-hop activism in light of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Hi, my name is Courtney Richardson. I'm a sophomore and I'm pursuing a degree in public health science. I also worked with Jessica over the summer as a summer research fellow for FIRE. So my research with my partner Ariana focuses on Black women and their natural hair and how that's a way of asserting freedom as an everyday choice and how that's separate from what society believes is a white Eurocentric idea of beauty and how Black women assert their freedom against that.
Hi everyone, I'm Ariana Lawson and with my partner Courtney, we are researching the natural hair movement. When coming into FIRE, I was torn between researching Black film and natural hair, but ultimately I chose to research the natural hair movement because I have an intimate connection with that, seeing as in like I do it my natural hair every day. And since doing this project, I've been able to talk to a lot of Black women about their natural hair journey and how they feel about their natural hair and how it's a statement of freedom. And I've really enjoyed that in this program.
So now that my co-researchers have had a chance to introduce themselves, you've had just a little taste of what it is that they're working on. We'd love to share a little bit more about the FIRE program and then specifically kind of the research that binds us all together. Right, so as I mentioned, the FIRE program is relatively small here at the university. It's only open to freshmen. And its aim is to actually involve freshmen in research from the very start of their undergraduate career, right? Our stream, so they call us FIRE streams. Each of us is a different research stream. And it's each chaired by a research educator and also a faculty leader. Catherine Knight-Steele, our AADHum project director, is our faculty leader on our research stream. And we're one of many in the entire program. However, we are the only humanities research stream in FIRE. Right? And we were able to kind of join that FIRE program. And they're now beginning to add more humanities streams, but we were the first. And we were only kind of able to wedge ourselves in there because of the AADHum Initiative, because of the backing of the Mellon Foundation, and of course of AADHum as well. And so we are really proud and excited by that opportunity to infuse some humanities principles and practices into what it was already a robust kind of research experience here at the university. So if you're interested, you can read more about our specific research stream at the link above on our AADHum website. We can also kind of just share a little more about what it is that we hope to do. So the research streams are all guided by the faculty members' research agendas themselves, right? So my co-researchers kind of just jump right into my own project, so I can tell you a little bit about what I'm interested in because that's what I shared with them. So I was trained as a rhetorical critic and rhetorical historian in the Department of Communication here at Maryland. And that just basically means that I look at history and pretty much all human events through the lens of language and through the lens of arguments. So when an event happens or a problem arises, I look mainly at how people are constructing arguments to defend it, to justify it, to contest it. And in looking at those things, I try to understand how human beings make sense of the world around them. My specialization is African American rhetorical history and looking specifically at how Black people have constructed arguments, often to combat racism, violence, and oppression here in the United States. So my dissertation specifically looked at how freedom as an idea was constructed and contested in 1865 through 1868, right after the moment of legal emancipation at the end of the Civil War, towards the end of the Civil War. As you can imagine, a lot of that research was extremely sad and depressing, and so when I was doing my dissertation, I got very, very tired of reading white voices defining freedom for Black people, and often in such restrictive, exclusive ways. So my more recent research has looked at how Black users are online are participating and engaging with that history and redefining, reinventing, remixing freedom in their own ways, on their own terms, and in digital spaces that they are cultivating and shaping every single day. So this is the research question that I shared with my team of co-researchers. And basically what I invited them to do then was to interpret it in their own ways and chase down their own interests as they see it connected to this question. So as you heard them already kind of mention, we're approaching this question from the perspective of people's responses to such a pivotal film, Black Panther, to Black users' responses to hip-hop activism online, and specifically how hip-hop artists are intervening in social movements online, and then finally, of course, how Black users are talking about natural hair. So all of these are ways of talking about how freedom is being articulated by Black people in digital space. Any questions or concerns so far about kind of just that brief overview? So I do want to share with you as well our aims as a project. So as a team, we've kind of cultivated what it is our goals are. So these are just to give you a sense of what kind of work we're doing and why we're doing it. So as they kind of alluded to already, they are identifying and collecting interesting discourse online. Discourse that they feel is a part of these evolving freedom conversations and that is interesting and important to Black people and Black communities. We're also looking to affirm and also kind of better understand how Black people are engaging online, particularly in creative and innovative ways, as they participate in this ongoing history of Black people coming up with very creative, inventive, groundbreaking modes of resistance and rhetorical strategy. So these are our aims as a project, and I can show you just a little bit of a taste of what that work looks like. So this is an example of some of the work my students are doing. We are using digital skills of scholarly text encoding to not only just identify discourse online, but then describe, analyze, catalog, and archive it, right? The notion being that we want to hang on to these vital pieces of discourse, and while we could just screenshot tweets, we want to move a little bit beyond that and save them in a stable way, and also interpret them in ways that actually respect and really affirm critical Black thought and theory. So this is just a taste. This probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you unless you do scholarly text encoding using the TEI standard of markup, which my students can tell you all about, right? But just rest assured that this shows, actually just at this point, we've been together for what, 10 months? 10 months, and none of them had any experience with scholarly text encoding when they came in, and this is the work that they're producing now. And just to give you a taste of what kinds then of online discourse they're looking at, this is an example from the Black Panther Project. This is one of the Twitter threads that our co-researchers wanted to kind of hang on to, really try to interpret, understand, unpack, and analyze, and put into conversation with those legacies of freedom discourse in the United States, particularly as argued by Black people. The last thing I'll show you before I kind of open it up for this conversation among the panel and also among all of you is our values as a project. These are the values that we hope to practice and cultivate among our team, right? And then also take out into the world with us, maybe into other classes, other work that we do on an everyday basis. So as a team and as a project, we value the agency and the empowerment of Black people and their voices every day, the historically innovative language practices of African Americans, the intellectual, physical, and emotional labor of Black rhetors, and those who endeavor to amplify and analyze their contributions to public discourse, the vital role of archives, both traditional and of course of digital, in constituting but also disrupting human histories and public morality, and finally, the power of archives to make meaning of human past, present, and future. So we're going to leave those up on the screen as a reminder to ourselves and also to all of you of the values that we seek to uphold, not only as a team, but also hopefully in this discussion today. And we're going to kind of hopefully proceed forward with a rich, robust conversation. As a reminder, I'll say, please join in this conversation throughout, right? Please don't feel like you have to hang on to your questions. Go ahead and just raise your hand, and we'll try to bring you right on in, right? So the first question I'll just kind of pose to my co-researchers, because it's the one that I actually was interested in as soon as they joined, was what brought them to FIRE in the first place. It's such a relatively small program. It markets itself to freshmen who are dealing with all sorts of other stuff when they enter the college environment. And so I'm a little bit curious about how my students chose to enter into the FIRE program, what made them stick around, and then also what brought them into this particular research stream.
I'll start. So I was invited to FIRE because I was an intended engineering major. So this program promotes itself to science majors, STEM majors, people who are trying to do research in labs. But I stayed in FIRE because of this humanities research and this African American discipline specifically. I was really interested in learning more about my history as a Black person, and I was interested in researching current stuff that's happening online. So that's why I decided to stay in this stream.
So for me, I was also invited into the program, and I'll be honest, I was thinking about quitting after the first semester because this program is really catered towards STEM research, and that wasn't really something I saw myself doing in the future. And so I decided to stay because I talked to Jessica at the FIRE Fall Welcome, and it was there that she spoke about the research with such passion, and she really centralized Black people in a way that I had never experienced before. And from then on, I knew that I need to be in this stream, and I'm so glad I stayed.
I swear I didn't tell her to say that.
So I was also invited to the program, and I decided to stick with it just because I wanted to have that hands-on, real research experience, because it's not very common to experience that as a freshman. So what led me to choose this stream is that, well, to be honest, originally I had wanted to do a different stream, but it had filled up, and I didn't see myself going into other streams, so I was also thinking of maybe dropping the program. But then I did more research, I looked into it, and I saw that this course did count as a humanities credit, so I was interested in learning more about what was to come, and I'm happy that I stuck with it because I definitely have a different perspective on everything now.
I was also invited to the program at the end of my acceptance letter, and truly I wasn't really interested in the beginning because I am a communications major, and most of the streams were about STEM and, you know, a lot of research and like labs, and I was just like, that's not for me. I hate science, I hate math, and I was just like, no, thank you. And to be brutally honest, my mother made me join and said, you're gonna do it anyway, so I was like, okay, well, I guess I have no choice. But then I, you know, saw the stream about African American digital archives, and I got really interested, also because I'm kind of thinking about minoring in African American studies. So anything with African American studies truly interests me.
For me, I was also invited after I got accepted here. And all the streams are kind of these lab streams where you're sitting there pipetting, and just that, I knew that was something that I didn't want to do. Even though I am a STEM major, I just knew that like that type of research wasn't for me. And it wasn't until, like Courtney was saying, we went to the Fire fair where they described all of the different streams, and I had a conversation with Jessica, and she really interests me with this stream because that's something that I wasn't going to get the opportunity to do, especially as an undergraduate. I wasn't going to get the opportunity to do research, and being a nursing major, I don't really have that much time to be taking humanities classes, so I knew that this was something that I wanted to do, and it interested me.
So I just want to jump in and say, so a few of my co-researchers have mentioned this lab setting. So as I mentioned, because so many of the research streams are STEM focused, the actual structure of the program heavily emphasizes lab hours. So for those of you who are interested in how this program actually plays out every day, they only meet with me for 50 minutes a week. It's on Tuesday mornings from like 9:30 to 10:20, and if I wanted to, I would never have to see them again until the next Tuesday. I clearly love being around them, so I like to see them and talk to them as much as I can, but the whole structure is one 50-minute session, and that's kind of the check-in to see how you're doing with your research. But the rest of the time is supposed to be 6 to 8 hours of independent research in the lab every week, and someone's in the lab kind of checking in on them, but other than that, there's not much engagement with your research educators, possibly on a weekly basis. When our stream joined the FIRE program, that did not work for us. And so we had to communicate with the FIRE program and let them know that Jessica's not gonna have her students in the lab, because I do my research at home, I do my research in coffee houses, I do my research in bars. Like, I do not do my research in a lab. I don't know what I would do if I walked in a science lab, right? So my students do work very independently, but we also, in addition to our one weekly meeting, they meet with me once a week, one-on-one, or sometimes in their pairs, whether via phone or whether in person, whatever works for them in their schedules. And then they just check in with me as much as they need to throughout that process, right? So we use a lot of digital tools and tech to be in communication, but they are not required to be in a lab, but that's very different than all of the other 600-some FIRE students. So I just want to make that clear. Any questions or comments? Yes, absolutely.
How many is your whole class?
6. We're only missing one of my co-researchers today. Thank you for reminding me. Her name is Kaanita Iyer. She is listed on the program, just unfortunately she couldn't join us today. But I will kind of pause and say that's also very unusual. Most FIRE streams have about 35 up to maybe 70 students. I have 6. And it's amazing for me, but we can kind of ponder that discrepancy. Yeah, Damon. Let me ask, I'll put that back to the panel for just a minute. If you guys think about the work you've done, right, if there were 40 more of you, do you think this model would still be possible? Would it still be as, would it be the same kind of experience? Maybe it will change?
So I like the intimate setting of our small classroom and being able to talk to Jessica one-on-one. But I think if we had more people in our group, it would kind of help the diversity of our different topics, like how we have different things that we're researching. I think having more people and researching different things would be beneficial to the program. But I do like how it's a small class. We get to know each other. We get to learn about each other's research. And that's what I like about the small style of the class.
I want to also say if it was a bigger class with more people, I think we would have to meet twice a week instead of having our once a week one-on-ones with Jessica. But I do like our one-on-ones, but I don't think that would be possible just because there would be too many of us if it was a bigger class.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I just couldn't do the same type of work, right? So as you're hopefully getting a sense of, like, I'm not really their teacher. Like, we call our every Tuesday when we meet, it's our team meeting, right? And so we're doing research alongside each other. Yes, I've had to share some instruction when it comes to teaching them certain digital skills for the research. We engage in critical theory reading together, right, as they learn about archives, as they learn about Black feminism. But the actual everyday is not like, hey, sit down, let me lecture to you, let me teach you what you're doing this next week. They know what they're doing, but we just do it together. And I don't think that would be possible. It would not be the same immersive research experience. It would be pretty much, I think, like any other class where they end up learning about research, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to do it along with me in a way that is as effective. I also think some of the assessment procedures that we use in this experience would not work if I had 40 students. So this semester especially, because they're just kind of in the thick of their research and at this point they know exactly what they're doing, we have an open revision policy. Any assignments that they have, they can revise as many times and whenever they want. Right, so the emphasis really is on learning about what research looks like in the real world, and in research in the real world, you have to revise 10, 20, 50, 100 times, and so they're allowed to do that. And so their grades are more about process rather than about the product, and that's not something I could do as an instructor with 45, 70 students. Yeah, there was a question there. Okay. Absolutely. Sure. Great.
But then the other, I'm just interested in how you, like you said a little bit about it, but you say more about what sort of tools and technology you're seeing, how people learn that. Like, that was a big, super interesting thing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd love to give them a chance to talk more about it.
So we use this program called AADHum, and on that program, we basically start with TEI coding, and that's like the specific tags that we use to, if you saw on the picture that she put up, Jessica taught us those tags, and then we use them where we saw fit using that AADHum platform.
I guess also to add to that, with using TEI on AADHum, a lot of it was working with it on our own and trying to figure out what works best for our project, and then meeting with Jessica and troubleshooting anything that we had along the way. And so I can say, for me at least, because I worked over the summer, I'm a little bit more confident in my abilities online, but I have to keep practicing it so that for our end product, we'll have this, hopefully, website that we've all coded ourselves.
I can also add and say a little more as well. So the AADHum software, so there are three main pieces of software that my students are using on an everyday basis. The first being AADHum Text Editor. So AADHum Text Editor is a free open source, they call it kind of hackable text editor, so you can use it for a variety of coding projects. And that's the program in which they are writing their actual code. The second program that they're using is called GitHub Desktop. It pairs very well with GitHub as an online repository platform, mainly used for collaborative coding projects. and they use that to sync their local machine work to the actual servers online. And the final piece is they actually have all been trained using Zotero Citation Manager as well, because they're learning a lot about different research, because they're undergraduates and they need Zotero, because I needed Zotero and I wish someone had told me when I was an undergrad to start using Zotero. So they use that as well to manage the research that they're doing every day. One of our main principles with all the software that I expose them to is that it must be free and open source in order to lower the barriers of accessibility and affordability for them learning this tech. And the last thing I'll add is, in terms of the main skill, it is that text encoding. Sophia mentioned, Sophia mentioned TEI. TEI stands for Text Encoding Initiative. The website for it, if anyone is interested, is tei-c.org. And TEI is just a standard of coding markup. So it's a whole expansive set of, like Sophia said, of tags that you can use. So similar to HTML, like the B tag is how you make something bold. In TEI, the supply tag is how you actually add additional interpretive or supplemental information to an existing text. So for the Black Panther thread, Sophia and Kayla, could you say a little bit more about how you use the supply tag to provide information about the tribal nations? So how you decided to do that, and maybe a little bit about why?
So the specific thread that Jessica's talking about was a thread on Twitter talking about the representation in the film and how the film used different pieces of African history and African culture and actually represented them in the film. For example, I can't remember exactly what country it was from, but there was a country in Africa where they wear like neck rings, all like from the top of their neck all the way to the bottom to like stretch their neck. There was a character in the film who wore those same neck rings, and on the thread, it said the country and like it showed how accurate the representation was and compared it to a real African country as well as to Wakanda. And then when we put it into the TEI coding, we would put the country to amplify the country itself. And then if the thread itself used some type of like Black vernacular or something like that, we would also put in that Black vernacular was used instead of correcting it, and we're amplifying the Black voices instead of silencing them.
So TEI provides a series of tags that co-researchers have been using to really bring certain pieces of critical Black thought that they've learned about into not only their interpretation of those texts, but the digital models they're creating via the coding. So does that answer your question?
I'll stand up so we can all hear. So I heard you mention a little bit of website as a final product, and you've been talking about a product. So, you know, there's a process, but I assume we're both a grade, but also for, you know, putting a certain kind of end mark for this work, there's going to be something to say, we did this together. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about that? But I'd also like to hear a little bit more about ownership. We know in a lab setting, you know, there are protocols in which different disciplines use for the first, second, third, 15th author, and that is a way for people in your position to get credit, but also have that credit, you know, proportional to the effort and leadership. And so could you talk about how that both follows a lab science model, but also maybe it's disrupted as you think about yourself as peers rather than in a hierarchical relationships. But as you stressed, some of this is definitely related to what your interests are as a researcher who's not in the same position as your fellow researchers.
So if you guys don't mind, can I start off with that one? So your first question is simply about the end product of the research stream, right? So all of the research streams, as I said, because they're faculty research, it's like what's the faculty member actually doing and how can the co-researchers join in? And so at the start of this research stream, the project I was working on is a book project, right? That is kind of a corollary to the dissertation project. So moving away from the deeply historical focus and looking at how in contemporary digital spaces, Black users are redefining and remixing freedom on their own terms, right? So that's how my co-researchers kind of came to these ideas, because I was like, if you imagine writing a chapter for this book, or if this was an edited volume, what would you want your chapter to be about, right? And so that's how they kind of dove in, and they're like, well, I think a chapter in this book would have to be about how people are responding to this film online, right? Or how people are arguing and talking about natural hair, right? And so the book project is one part of the end project. We all know, though, that book projects, like, when they get done is when they get done, right? And so that is an end point, but the way the research streams are set up, they keep going on year after year. So the co-researchers are joining in for 2 semesters, but at they might be in any stage of that faculty member's product, right? The other product that would go along with that is a supplementary website that was conceived as a way to kind of complement the book, right? So we also know among us that not everyone reads academic books as much as we wish that they would, but sometimes a public website or a public archive could be much more accessible. And we're particularly invested in that because we care about accessibility and affordability. And so we wanted to envision a website that people could come to and learn more about how freedom is being discussed and debated and defined online. So my students are not only learning TEI encoding, but actually this semester, the next stage of our work is to think about what that website would really look like in terms of kind of the ethical concerns we want to animate with that project, the values of our project that we hopefully are being translated into that final website. So they're also supplementing their TEI with HTML coding, with CSS coding, and also with web design. So a member of the MIT staff here at the University of Maryland, Ferdinand Lindblad, is actually speaking to them on Tuesday about principles of advocacy by design. So as they embark on this next stage, they're doing so hopefully with questions of how can a public-facing website serve as a mechanism of activism online and of advocacy, right? So the website is also hopefully one of the projects that they're working towards. The second question you asked about is ownership, and I'd love to invite one of my co-researchers to come in and talk about this. Specifically, maybe we can start with Courtney. Because Courtney and I worked closely together throughout the summer as a research fellow, and as you said, we all kind of work together as a team, but traditional academic publishing is going to put you someone as a first author, second, third, and with the book that would be an issue that I definitely have to consider when I get to that stage. But even for the encoding work that we do now, TEI actually provides for us a way to account for the labor of the project. So, Courtney, would you mind talking a little bit about responsibility statement?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, the header of it, we also put in who encoded it and who transcribed the information originally, and then with the responsibility statements, we put in, if you go in, you would put your name and then what you added or supplemented the material that's already in the text, and then there would be multiple of those so that each person's work is amplified, and so that we keep track of what was added to the document and what was supplemented, removed, however the person saw fit to edit the document.
Does anyone else want to jump in as well as talk about kind of our shared labor? So in terms of those responsibility statements that Courtney talked about, right, I know that is not a traditional mode of academic publishing that many of us are used to. But the TEI files that we put online are published online. If you look at the markup, like Courtney said, you can see every time one of us did a thing, right? So anytime one of us, if someone was responsible for transcribing the text, it says so right there in the encoded document, like the example I showed you earlier. If someone was responsible for the first stage of encoding, it says that right there as well. There's also a section that tracks revisions to the document, changes to the document. So that is all carefully kind of recorded. And the last thing I'll say is the software that we use, GitHub Desktop, allows for collaboration, right? And so you can also see who was literally uploading revised versions to the project. That is all very visible on the public platforms that we use. So even though that is not traditional academic publishing standards, right, I'm really excited by that possibility that if we come to embrace different forms of publishing in the academy, right, we might be able to amplify kind of mechanisms like this that actually make very visible the labor of all of the researchers involved.
Hi, I have a question about what you guys are getting from the project, and it seems like the project is framed by this idea of freedom, and I'm curious to know what you guys as co-researchers, and it seems like you as the lab leader are trying to reduce a kind of hierarchy. So I'm curious for the folks who are undergrad, what you understand
Specifically for Sophia and I, we focused a lot on Twitter. And before this class, I really didn't take Twitter as serious as it should be taken, especially with Black Twitter and the community that is on Twitter. I didn't realize how strong of a community it was and how just sharing a meme of something about how we grew up as African Americans or how we grew up as Black people can be so intimate and something that you can share along from Black people all over the nation. And I thought that was really interesting, so I think I learned a lot about freedom on digital spaces particularly, and especially for the film that we're focused on, which is Black Panther. I wasn't really looking at Black Panther as intensely as I was until this, because I didn't really get interested into the movie until people started like coming out to the openings wearing like traditional African garb and stuff like that, and I really got interested then. And I saw how important the film was to them, and it made the film important to me, and especially hearing about it when they were writing on Twitter.
Kind of going along with what Kayla was saying, like we already know that social media is kind of like this place of activism at this point, and through our research of Black Panther, we've been seeing how people are using like social media platforms like Twitter to talk about like aspects of representation, which is what we're focusing on. So they're talking about how this movie was basically showing a different light of Black people. Like there was a lot of Black excellence in the film. So that's something that we don't really get to see a lot. So we were using these people's thoughts that they were putting onto Twitter to kind of talk about this aspect of representation.
For our project specifically, the natural hair movement, I never really thought of wearing your hair natural as like a statement of freedom or a statement of like Black is beautiful. I never really thought of that because I've been wearing my hair natural since freshman year. But it really is because women in the past had to straighten their hair or wear weaves or just weren't able to be their true selves in their natural beauty because of what the world told them was beautiful, and because a lot of people with their natural hair won't get a job because they have natural hair or something like that. They have consequences for wearing their natural hair. So doing this project really taught me about the freedoms of natural hair, and it also taught me about like Twitter as a platform of freedom. Like I never really thought about that before. One of the first things we talked about in this class was the Black man smiling hashtag as a way of freedom against all the violence you see. Like you see videos of police brutality and all that stuff. So the Black man smiling hashtag was to combat that and show like Black men are happy and stuff like that. So I never really thought about that before. I just thought of it as a hashtag. So that's what this class has taught me.
Okay, so I'm sure you guys are all aware of the Black Lives Matter hashtag. It's been pretty prominent since like 2013. So for me, when I was using Twitter back then, I was just like scrolling through and then I'd see the hashtag and I had like I had a broad idea of what was going on during that time, but it's still obviously very prevalent right now. You still see the hashtag being used like constantly. So for me, something that I realized was that people with influence would be using that hashtag to, kind of build up a following and like get their voice out there to kind of fight for freedom, essentially. So what I wanted to focus on was Black musical artists specifically. So what I've been doing is analyzing like lyrics or things they've posted on social media, and what I've learned from that is that the way that I listen to music now is just completely different, because now I'm not purely listening just for like a beat or anything, but I'm like actually paying attention to the lyrics and like kind of getting a better sense of like what's actually like going on behind that, because there's obviously many layers and there's a deeper meaning to everything.
think beyond what you get credit for in this class, and then also whether or not this has impacted any of you to continue on with research, or how you think of the sort of professional benefits of an experience like this.
So I'll just repeat quickly the two parts, I think, of that question. You can correct me if I'm wrong. The first part being, has this in any way, and if so, how, influenced your own online engagement and how you actually engage in digital spaces? And then the second being, as far as your response to or what you're taking away from this experience with regards to professional trajectories, possibly research or others. Great.
In terms of the first question, I think for me, I've started to realize that when using social media, we have to think about what we're doing. We have to make conscious decisions because there's deeper implications to just tweeting certain things and putting it out there for the whole world to see. So I think for me and through this class, I've learned that the platforms that we're using, the tweets that we're sending, can mean different things to different people, and you really have to think about what you're putting out there and how people are going to interpret that.
For me, for me, in terms of the first question, I do use social media differently now, and I look at things differently. One, I really learned to look at the bias behind tweets or behind what I'm reading, and try to understand not only the author's bias, but my bias in reading it and where I'm the standpoint I'm reading it from. And that has also helped me in an academic stance too, because now when I'm reading something for econ, for example, a random class, I would look at the author's bias and try to understand where they're coming from and if that is accurate or if I have bias reading that as well.
For me in particular, I've been using Twitter a lot more. Before this class, my Twitter account was probably I made in 2010, and there was a picture of me at 10 years old. But besides that, I hadn't really been on it until this project. And I also have been learning a lot more about the threads and stuff, and learning how important that is, and learning that although some of these may be funny or even if they are serious, this is a part of history, and these are people's voices that need to be heard. Specifically, something that happened recently was the Serena cartoon, and stuff like that is a part of history, and people's comments on it are very important, and we can understand that through Twitter, even though it's something that may not be as respected as listening to a scholar talk about their research or something like that. What was the second part of the question again?
The second part of the question is about in terms of maybe future research experiences for your professional future. How has this experience influenced that?
Well, for me, I am a communications major with a track in public relations, and I want to be a social media analyst. So this is really important for me, obviously, and for my future. And I learned a lot more about the significance of a hashtag, the significance of what your profile looks like, and how important that is, and what you say on Twitter is forever, regardless if you delete it, someone can find it. So I thought that was really important for me.
For me, in terms of the second question, I really see myself continuing on in this research, especially with natural hair. It's something that I deal with every single day. It's a every single day choice. It was this morning deciding how I wanted to wear my hair for this. So it's definitely something that I want to continue on in the future. And even though my major is public health, I enjoy the social aspects of it, and even I can relate that back to Twitter and how users have been amplifying their own stories. Just this morning, I saw a tweet about how Black women and maternal mortality and how that's on the rise and how it's completely preventable. And so that could relate to my public health background and also to this research using online platforms as a way of asserting freedom.
So something that's been really interesting for me throughout using Twitter is just looking at threads and seeing how people respond to these tweets. That's been the most, I guess, that's like I've gained the most from like seeing how people like interact and like the conversations that develop from that. And as for like the research in general, I do see myself continuing with that just because since my since my research is focused on music, music is obviously like a big part of my life. I listen to it like every day. So even if I'm not like actively like doing research, it's like in my life, I'm always constantly listening to music, so I'm like always thinking about it.
I think one of the things that I've noticed as well, kind of just interacting with my co-researchers on an everyday basis, is that, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about this as far as what humanities has infused into the FIRE program, is that I'll either get an email from one of them, or they'll stop in my office, or they'll just mention something in class that clearly shows that what we're doing as part of the research team is just kind of like infiltrating their everyday life, as some of them have kind of mentioned. So I love that they're saying, yeah, I'm going to continue this research because I'm still interested in this topic. And so even if they leave the FIRE program because it's over, that they have developed the sensibility that like their lives themselves are research, right? They're learning about themselves and their communities and the things that interest them, and that's not specifically confined to just being in the FIRE program. And another thing I'll add is that the FIRE program does offer a mode of extending itself. So at the end of the 3-semester structure, FIRE students are invited to apply to be a peer mentor. This talk just came out, so I haven't talked to all my co-researchers about this, but I have talked to Courtney about this. Right? And Courtney's intention to possibly apply for the peer mentor program. It will allow her to actually stay on board the project, but as a more senior undergraduate researcher. And she would be kind of the bridge between this cohort of researchers and my next one. She will help train them in the skills and tech that we will be using, and she'll also be able to play an integral role in how the project moves forward towards those end products or wherever the project itself goes. Right? So there is the possibility with this program for those kinds of forward trajectories to stay in motion.
First of all, thank you so much to everyone on the panel. Your work is so admirable. My question for all of you is obviously the coding and the TEI work involves a lot of labor, and I'm wondering how you pick and choose what types of rhetoric you decide to go through the coding process. What makes it valuable to you? Is it the number of retweets if it's on Twitter? Is it the number of comments? Or is it like a personal meaning of your own analysis of your own research? What makes something worth doing to you?
I mean, as we kind of learned about academic research is that researchers have the decision to choose what gets to be seen and what doesn't. So as researchers, we kind of make this decision as, it's a hard one, but it's a decision that we have to make in terms of, is this tweet or is this piece of information moving towards our goal of amplifying Black voices? So it's not necessarily has to do with specific aspects of like retweets or popularity, but more of what it means to us and the scope of the project as a whole.
And typically when we find something, we want to make sure that it was written by a Black person because we want to amplify Black people. And then we're sure to take care of making sure that we amplify that person. And so whether it be their accomplishments or things like that, or if it's a Twitter handle, we don't want to find their identity because they put themselves out as their Twitter handle and their name. And so we have to be careful with the ethics of that. And then also, because archives are traditionally, they don't represent Black people as the way Black people want to be represented, we're making our own archives, and so we have to think critically about how the outcome of this project will be for Black people in general.
If we can just pause for a minute, I'd actually just like to linger there, if that's okay, on the question of ethics. So Courtney Courtney brought up a few of the concerns that as a team we are thinking about every day, and some of them are kind of like halting us in our steps just a bit. So we can kind of just pause there, and if anyone wants to ask a follow-up, we definitely invite that because we care a lot about the ethical decisions we're making, not only in choosing what posts or what kind of content to work with, but also that how, as Courtney said, we're representing and encoding that content. Like, as she mentioned, whether or not we're trying to identify them by name, even though they've clearly only identified themselves by their Twitter handle, right? We don't ever try to find out who they are, right? So if anyone has questions about those ethical concerns, we invite those.
There's a concern for people who project their presentation as being black or black, but they aren't. Specifically, academia has taken to using Black Twitter as a great source for qualitative data. There is no specified process for irony. So participants don't know who they're representing, which is morally unethical. Secondary to that is that there are, I know people who are using it to pull data who themselves are not African American, but they will present, or they'll create accounts that need to, and they'll use language, and they will, quite frankly, put on a facade to be part of communities where you have to be a black woman, and part of that community where you have to be. And so there's this falsification, and the problem is that once this becomes part of your research, and it kind of enters into this academic space, to my knowledge, right? Well, there isn't right now a process that is updated for this digital scholarship to kind of figure out what is real and what's fictitious. And just what are your thoughts on that, and what was your process to work with accounts? Because you said we're using, we want to amplify voices for African Americans. But we don't know that they're African. We know that there are people who use African American memes in a way that can almost be cartoonish. And you would say racial goes up? Yeah. So, what is that process?
That's a hard
like?
question.
Because they live like online that may not be authentic to actual experience, which tends to be good.
Yeah.
So our project specifically with natural hair, one of our first texts was a tweet in response. It was Zendaya's tweet in response to Juliana Rancic when she wore her hair in dreadlocks at the Oscars, and she said that she probably smelled like weed. And so it was Zendaya, she's a black woman, so she posted that on her Twitter account. And so we thought that that would be a good text to use for our project. So for our next one, we chose the song I Am Not My Hair by India Irie. And so another black woman, we take care in making sure that the people who are tweeting or making these songs, and we use that their whatever it is that they produce, we make sure that they're black people, because that's our goal of this project, to amplify black people. But that's specific towards our natural hair.
Kind of towards your specific question about how there is no real way to know, that's true. Like, especially for us, where we're not specifically focusing on like celebrities or people that are writing songs, we're using actual like normal Twitter users that are just tweeting about the specific subject. So we genuinely do not know if these people are black or not, or if they're kind of falsifying, like putting on a facade. So that is something that we think about a lot, something that we have to take into account, but there is really no way for us to know. Something that we also try to focus on is how, like, since we're not checking in with these specific authors, how do we know that they want their information to be archived and to be preserved forever? Because even though they're posting on a public platform and they know that all these people have access to their information, we're still might be doing them an injustice of archiving their information and keeping it forever.
I think my short answer would be that we are doing our best in response to these very important ethical claims and these concerned to deal with, or this reality that I actually don't know who this Twitter user is. When we translate that to the undergraduate classroom environment, right, that poses a significant problem from one perspective, right? Because all of a sudden you're like, okay, the semester's over, like we don't know what to do now, like how do we move forward here? But on the other hand, it actually offers a very real opportunity for them to see exactly what we deal with as researchers every day, right? That a project might stall, or a project is going to pause for a moment while you really reflect on these concerns and figure out how to move forward. And that might not fit neatly into a fall semester little box, right? But in that moment, we will do our best to try to figure out how do we deal with the fact that we don't know who these Twitter users are? How do we deal with the fact that, I think I was at AOIR last week in Montreal, where someone was so gracious enough to be like, there was actually a study that was just published about this, here's the link everybody, to that study that did actually confirm, at least in that study, that the Twitter users that they talked to did not know that researchers were using their tweets. They didn't believe that scraping Twitter was legal, and that they did not, that they would, if they did, they might feel at least some type of way, but also actually refuse that at all, that they would not want their posts online if they realized they were being researched in particular ways, right? So when you're confronted with a study like that in our everyday academic research, we'd be like, okay, I really need to readjust, reflect on my project. And so that's actually what we have to do too. And whether or not that's a traditional academic classroom thing that would normally happen, that's kind of too bad. Like your syllabus might get thrown out the window. But because it's a research immersion experience, we actually get to take the time and try to figure out how to tackle those questions. I think I did see some hands before that question. Okay.
So the research that you guys have done so far, how does that make you feel as an individual? Are you finding more negative information out there or more positive information out there? And is that going to guide the way that you personally use the internet in terms of putting, I would say, more positive information out there?
While doing this research, I learned a lot about myself, particularly from representation. In elementary school and in middle school a little bit, I found myself reaching to fit into whatever stereotypes were presented to me. And I didn't really, being from Connecticut and the suburbs, I wasn't really connecting to any of the gangster or hood narratives that were being put out. And I didn't really find myself fitting into Medea, seeing as I was like 10. So like I can't really be like an older black woman who's like cracking jokes on everyone. And although I'm not African, I found myself more of a connection to the Black Panther film, and being able to see that representation. And that made me think a lot about myself and how I see myself. So I guess that's more of like the positivity I have found and what I've learned about myself. And I've also seen that on Twitter. A lot of people were, you know, telling their own narratives of what Black Panther meant for them. And a lot of people had similar stories to myself. So I found more positivity about that for Black Panther in particular.
For our project, I feel like I found more positivity for the natural hair movement. A lot of black women on online posting how to do their natural hair, teaching others. That's actually how I got into the project originally, because when I went natural in freshman year of high school, I needed to learn how to do my hair. So I was on YouTube almost every day trying to figure out how to style my hair and stuff like that. So I found that really positive. There's also a little bit of negatives on to it as well, as there will be with most things, because there's always people who don't believe like you should be wearing your hair natural, or who think natural hair is ugly, or like they only like 3C hair or 3A hair with the nice curls, not like actual black natural hair. So I found a lot of that, but overall it made me feel very positive about myself and my hair and my experiences with my hair, because I do get frustrated and irritated, and it's good to know that other people do as well. So it's been a positive experience.
Yeah, so I definitely say there's obviously pros and cons to the work that we're doing. For the positive side, definitely just seeing the action that's being taken and all the support. So for my work, I've been like dissecting and like just analyzing music videos or lyrics in general. And from that work, like the hard part about it is just like seeing what's being said in the lyrics, because it's like kind of like tough to hear. And also for like music videos, the This Is America music video was a pretty like graphic video. It was kind of hard to watch, and it was just like, it kind of made you more aware of like what's going on. So I guess the negative side of the whole research experience is just seeing that it's kind of like reality, this is what's happening, but the positive side is that action is being taken.
I think we have time for a couple more.
The sort of process for your selecting the research topic. It seems like each of the groups you found topics that you were selecting, which is amazing. But I know that how is getting to that point, and I guess kind of process that is both meaningful and also sort of within the constraints of the overall goal of the research. It's going to be really hard, so I'm really curious to know if there are sort of specific strategies you use, how much time you took to research possibilities, and how you ended up, sort of what the process was that got you to the topics you were researching.
And just for audio, I'll repeat that question. So, how did we all arrive at our research topics? What was the process of selection like for us? Maybe what strategies did we use to arrive at our topics, and maybe how long did we spend kind of pondering the possibilities?
For me, when I heard the topic, Jessica's topic, I had a lot of ideas flowing in my head of what I can do. And like almost right after class, I called my parents and I was talking to them about things I can do in this class. Natural hair was one of them. Black film reputation was another. I'm also a business student, so I was thinking about how I can incorporate business into my project, maybe looking at the stock markets or stuff like that. So I was really like talking my ideas through with my parents. And then I landed on either film representation or natural hair. And I came to class thinking it would be one of those two things, and then I ended up talking to Courtney, and she was also thinking about doing natural hair and black beauty. And then we started talking about our conversation, about our topic, and what we could do with our topic, and that's really what sold me on doing natural hair.
So when we first started the research, it was like around the same time that Black Panther had come out, and there was a lot of buzz about it, and especially how much money they were making. So I kind of felt like it was wrong not to include Black Panther, and seeing how big it was and seeing how many people were talking about it on Twitter.
So for me, like obviously I'm not African American, so for choosing a topic that was more like, that had a more personal effect for me was it was like a little more difficult just because I couldn't have like that personal like experience. But for me, since music was it is a big part of my life, and my like favorite genres are like hip hop and rap, and that's obviously like a prominent part of Black culture. So I thought I could like relate my own interests to that. And then with the Black Lives Matter movement, I would like always see that popping up, so I thought I could like tie those in together with like music and like how artists have been using that hashtag to kind of like spark up more conversation.
So I'll add really quickly for listening to the question. One of our co-researchers who can't be here, her name is Kaanita, and I'll just add really quickly, her process has been ongoing. She has changed her research question multiple times throughout the past 2 semesters, and she's just kind of perfectly settled on where she wants to be. She's broadly interested in journalism. She's a journalism major, and she wanted to think about the stories we tell through journalism. And kind of connected actually to your question as well, she ended up getting very frustrated and depressed with the work because she found so many of the media narratives obviously to revolve around criminality, violence, and poverty. And at first she was like, let me just look at that then. And then she realized that a lot of those stories certainly weren't centralizing Black lives. They were not actually amplifying Black experiences. So she has undergone a real process, and she's now actually looking specifically at Black journalists and their narratives. So, and not even just their media coverage or stories about Black lives or Black people, but just their work as journalists. How do they tell stories? How do they intervene in the dominant media narrative that they have to grapple with every day? So she's someone who, her research question has really evolved, and it's just been a process, and she's had the space to undergo that process, and it was a real trial and error because of how she felt about the work. We have time for one more question, Diane?
Thank you. I just want to say again how impressed I am with the work you're doing, and I've learned a lot from listening to your panel. One of the things I'm wondering about is so many of the, at different points in your description about your work, you mentioned a really profound ethical set of questions, or you raised questions that have to do with the longer arc of the way Black women and their representation is considered, or just questions of representation or media questions. And I wonder, even though you have your majors chosen, it sounds like, and they STEM and business and so on, has taking this course made you want to take more courses in the humanities that might help you dig further into some of those closed doors that have happened as you've been in contact?
So respecting the diversity of majors represented here on this team, has this experience made you want to explore more opportunities or courses in the humanities?
For me, as a nursing major, yes, because I feel like humanities research has it has deeper implications, and it has the opportunity to create social change that I feel like you can with STEM research, but I feel like me having this personal connection to this research, it's given me kind of this want to continue and to take more, say, African American studies classes, because in an anatomy class, you're not learning about African American studies. So for me, it's like kind of made me think about more classes that this campus has to offer that kind of cater and can relate to my research particularly.
I think I'm a little biased, seeing as I'm a communications major, and this semester I kind of accidentally found myself into 3 classes that are centered around African American studies, including FIRE. So I've definitely been thinking about minoring in African American studies, or maybe minoring in Black women's studies.
So for me, I definitely want to continue on in this class and be a peer mentor for the next cohort of students. And I also want to take more classes that can help relate the African American experience to public health, because there's a lot of implications there. And there's definitely a lot of classes that I can take that kind of revolve around that idea.
For me, I think I would also like to take more African American classes. I really enjoyed this project specifically and being able to research what I wanted to learn about. And so I would like to take more classes like that allow me to look at what I want to look at and aren't just like a classroom setting class like every other class I'm taking. So yeah, I think it would.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in taking more, but I don't know if I have the room in my schedule to fit them in, unfortunately. But I actually am taking a class this semester called The Impact of Music on Life, which is interesting because it ties into my work. So that's been pretty helpful. But for the most part, this experience has been great. I definitely do see myself viewing things from a new perspective, and a lot of the work that I've done has contributed to that mindset.
So I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Lunch is starting soon, which I'm sure excites you all. But I did you all for your questions. I didn't even have to use my questions. We had all yours, which is great. I'm glad you got a chance to talk directly to our full team. I also would just like to take a moment and just say I'm really grateful not only for this entire conference to really have this opportunity to bring this community together, but specifically this chance to celebrate these students. So I think in these big colleges, it's really hard for students to really be seen and to be heard. For the precious few that get awards and scholarships, that's great, but for most of the students, they turn in an assignment, they get the grade, they don't want to see their professor. So I'm just really grateful that you all were here to help me celebrate this amazing team, who's notably a team all of women of color, and here today for Black women specifically. If you could just join me in celebrating.